our blooming Catholic life. Let me turn this light on over here. Get that going a little better. Is that a little better? Maybe. So last week I talked at a retreat for the Seven Sisters Apostolate at my church. If you're not familiar with Seven Sisters, we're literally a group of 7 women who pray one each day of the week for our priest. It's pretty simple. Ours actually has 2 priests as well as a group for the archbishop, and we have a rebel little group for our deacons, which includes deacons in formation, our active deacons, as well as our deacons who have retired or moved on or on our sick list. So we're praying for I feel like it's 6 deacons right now. So we have 7 ladies praying for our pastor, 7 for our parochial vicar, 21 for the archbishop, and then 7 ladies praying for our deacons, as well as we have substitutes. So this could apply to almost anyone, though. You don't have to be in the Seven Sisters. Our retreat theme was Cardinal Robert Sarah's The Power of Silence, which is very important when you're talking about holy hours, right? And doing intercessory prayer. Intercessory prayer can be hard to do for an entire hour because your own prayer requests come out. And as one of the ladies shared during the question segment much later on in the day, she goes into the chapel and she just begins weeping for the state of the world and the state of our country. So how do you quiet that enough? Because it is a gift, and it's a blessing, right? We're called to do that in the Beatitudes. But these are holy hours specifically for our priests, deacons, and archbishops. So how do you bring it all back? So we were looking at the book, The Power of Silence, and yet the ladies weren't going to get their copy until after my talk. So we're kind of like getting them revved up and excited to be in silence. And the speaker before me talked about silence at the end of her father's life and how God used that silence to do a great work in her father. And it's very beautiful. I can't share that story with you. It's not my story. But it's difficult to enter into that moment when somebody is dying. When are you too much? Right? You want to be with them and accompany them, but God's also working them and preparing them. If you've ever been at somebody's deathside bed, you know what I'm saying. Sometimes it's easier to pray kind of more in a corner of the room or hold their hand, but pray silently. And there's many great ways of doing that. There is the Divine Mercy Chaplet specifically written for the sick and dying. And if you do the entire program, it does take an hour. So it's great to do as a holy hour. So if you have time away from the hospital bed or you're not able to get to it, that is a great thing to go and do in adoration. You can get that for the friars of the fathers at the Divine Mercy Shrine up in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. I'm going off script here. There's a script. I'm actually going off script. I know you're not shocked if you follow me at all. So some other things you can do here. Oh, I have read parts of The Power of Silence, and only parts because I'll say the book's not next to me here. Sorry. It is a book that is written in numbered paragraphs. You don't necessarily have to read it sequentially. And even if you do, when you pick it up and you read one of those numbered paragraphs, so many of you who are doing like the catechism year have found you can't just read it cover to cover. It's just so deep and so rich. You're going to read like one of those paragraphs and then go meditate on that. So it is a great thing to take to a holy hour. Because it's a book on silence and it is spiritual reading, but also because it's going to invite you to read that small bit and then spend the rest of the time in meditation. This book is also funny because The Power of Silence is written by Robert Cardinal Sarah with Nicholas Diat, and Nicholas Diat does the introduction. And I believe there's another book that came around from the same time that was written by Nicholas Diat, and Cardinal Robert Sarah actually gives the introduction. Excuse me for just a minute. I forgot I'm supposed to be following. You guys may be chatting in the live chat. Oops. And I didn't have the live chat on. Live chat is now enabled. I can see that on my phone if anybody has any questions. And so the second book, the one by Nicholas Diet, is called A Time to Die. And in both that entire book, as well as the very beginning of Cardinal Robert Sarah's book, they're actually visiting like monasteries and convents and friaries and accompanying those religious at the end of their life. And the whole point of that is how we have forgotten how to die. Not just that we have forgotten how to die, we've forgotten all the lessons that come with accompanying someone who is dying. It's so far removed from our modern American life. I'm going to say that because I know people internationally watch this and they probably have a different experience. And so please put that in the comments below what your experiences are like. But in America, a lot of times, medical care, people are working all the time. They can't take care of mom or dad in the house. And so they're put into a facility where it's a little bit more affordable and someone can give them that 24 hours a day care. Sometimes it's not affordable and you're relying on insurance or government aid to cover that cost. But what happens is we get to visit them. And even if you visit them every day, it's not the same as accompanying them like 24 hours a day, right? It's not the same. We don't get to see that process of silence. And really, the daily conversion of the dying is amazing. And it's something that, again, this is not in the original talk, breaks my heart about euthanasia, suicide, and assisted suicide, because they don't really have that time to have that silence work on them. Instead of having silence, they're cutting off midstream. And so they don't have that time for really growth and conversion with the Lord. And we don't have that time. It's a completely different experience. I don't know that it's a valuable experience. Then your death has like no meaning. And people are searching for that meaning and they're trying to do organ donation. And then there's special organ donation centers where you're supposed to, it's getting super creepy, right? And that's almost like the only value of your life is in dying to give your body parts to other people. That is not this lesson, friends. That is not this lesson. This is the lesson of letting go, spiritual detachment. When secular Franciscans talk about poverty, we don't speak about it in the same way the friars do. We have to be detached. Most of these things behind me, this artwork, was actually given to me by a friend as she downsized. We have to have detachment from those things. And she knew that they were beautiful things. There was a whole, they were like two giant tubs of beautiful, beautiful artwork of the saints. And I was able to distribute them. At the time, I was tutoring a number of young men for a science class, and they got to pick out a Mother's Day gift to take home with them. Beautiful Catholic artwork. These young men, they were like 10 and 12. They couldn't have afforded to get their mothers something so beautiful. So my good friend Nina had that spiritual detachment. She's where I got most of these books. Even though these things were precious to her and they had meaning to her, she passed them on in a spirit of detachment. And so we have a material detachment, right? And we see, though, the detachment of our loved ones from us, from all things of this world as they prepare to die. There's a period where they're fighting death and they're watching TV constantly or reading books constantly, doing things in their pain. And in the end, they are silent, aren't they? They mainly just lay there, and you wonder sometimes they're not even able to speak. And it's gone interior, that detachment. It's really a beautiful process that we're removed from. And some of us, back to the topic, like our dear sister who was not permitted to be with her loved one who was dying during the COVID pandemic, the experience for her ended up being fruitful, but it really was a sacrifice that she couldn't be with that person. So we enter into that sacrifice as well. Even though she wasn't there in the moment, she was able to prayerfully participate in the great work that God was working in her father. I kind of go in and out of the two books and my thoughts about them in this talk. There's going to be a number of direct quotes, and I'm going to look down at my speech more when I get to those. So the first speaker introduced us to the who for the retreat, and that was specifically the seven sisters, the ladies who pray for our priests, deacons, and the archbishop, our amazing substitutes, and as well as the anchoresses. Anchoress is like a team leader, but it's a team leader in the ancient sense of the word of anchoress, which used to be a holy woman who lived in like a little cell attached to the church where she could see daily mass and people could pass food in and out, but she spent all of her time in this little tiny room attached to the church praying. That's what she did. And so, us anchoresses, our job is to pray for the women who are praying for the priests, deacons, and archbishop. And it's a heavy ministry, because when the women really open up their heart to you as to their challenges or their loves of the priests and the deacons, how much they consider them as their sons and their brothers, it's so rewarding. um and the person who spoke before me also gave us the what for the retreat. We were talking about dying to self. We're talking about outward silence, rejecting the dictatorship of noise. And she didn't really talk about the why as much. You can tell I'm already getting into it. And I'm going to get into the how a little bit in the with practical tips at the end. And I'm going to encourage you. I can't give you all a free copy of the book. Um, the Sorry, I was talking about two different books there. Now I've lost it. The book by Cardinal Robert Sarah. I can't give you a free copy of that book, but I'm going to encourage you to read that. The Power of Silence, Rejecting the Dictatorship of Noise. So there are some quotes in the introduction, which again was written by Nicholas Diat, and he talks about when he very first time he went to Chartreuse with Cardinal Sarah, and it's a convent for monks, and he says here, Chartreuse is the world where souls have abandoned themselves in God and for God. Don't you all feel like you're called to that abandonment whenever you go into that adoration chapel? You do. You set everything in your life like aside for a minute. You're just going in there for God. We don't have the advantage of living in a convent or monastery ourselves, but we enter into it for that holy hour or holy 5 minutes, whatever we have. We go in there and we're abandoning the world and we're abandoning ourselves for God. Let's see here. Oh, and then I really did talk about how blessed my parish is to have so many deacons, both the ones that have left us or have retired. Like I said, we have 2 in active ministry, and we have 2 in formation, which is super, super exciting. And my parish does have 2 priests. It's a unique situation where we celebrate 2 different rites of the church. We have a historic church and a modern church. And so the modern church does the Roman rite, and the little historic church downtown focuses on the ordinariate of the chair of St. Peter. And so up until like 2 days after I gave this speech, we were sharing those 2 priests, and now one of them is full-time at each parish, and there's going to be a 3rd priest coming in. So we are very excited. As well as, the ordinary is bursting at the seams. My parish is in a time of renewal and really turning to the Lord and going deep into theology as well as accompaniment. And then we even have, on top of all this transition that's going on, we have our Archbishop, who I am in Maryland. We just had the Maryland Attorney General's report. And so our Archbishop is facing all those challenges that he already had on his plate, as well as dealing with that and a lot of very hurt souls, and really ramping up to make sure we haven't I don't hear of the abuse crisis like I used to. There's really good protections in place in Maryland. I'm very happy with them when they're followed. Not everyone understands them, all of us lay people, so you have to really try and understand them. But yay. So there's a lot going on that we're dealing with. And so we'll go back to our priests. They have abandoned themselves in God and for God. As we enter into the chapel to pray for them, we get to enter into that mystery just a little bit because we are their spiritual mothers. I don't know who's watching. You might be a spiritual father or brother as well. But when we're the spiritual mothers, it's like we're going in there and we're not just supporting them, we're actually like feeding the priest. We're like Mary and Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, and we're all Mary mothering and ministering to our Lord and his disciples. And as I go back into the quotes in the introduction, as they went from the chapel and back to their rooms for the night, he says, in order to get there, it was necessary to walk through endless, cold, austere quarters. And it's kind of like that when you go to adoration, whether you're going from one end of the church complex to another. Maybe you have a long drive, maybe it's just a big parking lot, but sometimes it feels very cold. Maybe you've just been overwhelmed with the work you've been doing lately, and you're just longing to spend that time with the Lord. And anything apart from Him, that travel there can be so difficult. If you're like us, we have a 24-hour adoration chapel. So at a certain time of the day, the door is locked, and we have these little special key fobs that we're supposed to dangle in front of it, and the door pops open. Doesn't always work. So sometimes that cold austereness is flicking this thing, trying to get that door to open. And most of us do go to adoration alone. So you've already got a little bit of silence because there's no one there to talk to. You have that drive, that long hallway, and the light diminishes by little. And it's interesting. There's very few people I know that turn the lights up when they go to the adoration chapel. Most people turn the lights down, and they may close the blinds a little bit. We never close them all the way because safety, but we do tend to draw them just a little bit. It is an instinct for us to explore silence of the night. We're almost creating that night, even though it could be midday when we go in the adoration chapel. And back to the quote, he says, Carthusian, plain chant imparts a slowness, a depth, a piety. I don't know how to turn pages, sorry. A depth, a piety that is sweet and the same times rough. And I do think that's very poignant as well. I know a lot of people on their way to the adoration chapel, or when they first go in, they may have music on through their car, headphones, whatever. And so I want to encourage them, if they're going to do that, you may want to get some chant. The Gregorian chant, it is not metered like regular music, or even, have you ever noticed those really modern hymns that change the meter constantly for no apparent reason? And there's like 5 key changes in it, and they're just almost unsingable, right? Chant is not like that. It doesn't really have a structured rhythm, although if you see it printed in a modern hymnal in modern music notation, it gives almost everything an eighth note, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. It goes and moves like ebbing and tying with the ocean. Ebb and tide. It's going in with the ocean. And I mean, it just makes me think of Mama Mary, the star of the sea. And she carries you with you. It goes with your breath, it goes with your emotion. And I just love that. It does give you the feeling of motherhood, right? The baby in the womb. And it gives you that little bit, and it puts you in that mood. And if there is a little bit of roughness, that reminds us, at least us seven sisters, that we are praying for men. And I found out recently, it's on one of my nighttime Lectio Divinas, I think it was on Monday night this week, that I talked about the 7 steps I have found for Lectio Divina. I'd never heard of 7 steps before. I've only ever heard of 5, which are the 1, reading, literally reading. You read the passage multiple times slowly. 2 is meditating, where you're kind of in these 2 steps, you're kind of ruminating over what we're reading, as well as you're starting to listen to what God is trying to say to you through the reading. Right? 3 is oratio, which is conversational prayer. You may read a passage that tells you about the goodness of God, and then you go into a Franciscan prayer, God who is good, all good, every good. And then just start riffing on that, like St. Francis did, an expansive prayer. Like, God, I know you are good and that you love me. And it is out of goodness, sheer goodness, that you have created, because how could you but help in your goodness and joy, but to create more things that are good? And you said in the beginning, Lord, after you created things, that they were good. And I'm one of those creations, Lord. You said that was good. I cannot tell you how much, Lord, that shows me your love and how that makes me feel. See how easy it is, friends, to expand on that prayer. So that's step 3, oratio. And then contemplative. Remember, we can't actually do contemplative prayer ourselves, but we can open ourselves to the experience. Contemplative prayer is always a gift from God, but we can put ourselves in His presence, and that's where that silence comes in. So we had our time of talking, and now we listened, we talked, and now we need to go silent for just a little bit. And then the last step, the 5th step that I've heard before, is that we're going to find some sort of action to go out and do. But Everything I talked about in this talk before I started these 5 steps was this mysterious new first step, and it's called statio, slowing down, entering into the eternal moment with God. It's so important to get yourself to enter in that silence. And you may think, I've tried that so many times. Like maybe that's why you're listening to the music, or maybe you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet listening to an app on your phone, or even the Rosary, something that you pray along with your phone first because you have trouble entering into that silence alone. Or somebody may say, I get sleepy. Or as soon as I try and slow down, I start running through my to-do list, all the things I need to do when I leave, or I start daydreaming. And it's difficult. Let's just all admit it. Silence in a holy hour is really difficult in any prayer. It doesn't have to be an adoration chapel. It can be difficult. It can almost be more difficult at home because there's the chores are around you. You can see things that need done, right? So how do we need to do that? Well, I'm going to remind you the why first so that you know why silence is so important. Sacrifice. It is a sacrifice. Let's get really real here. Priests, deacons, and the archbishop, their life is a living sacrifice. They are acting in persona Christi. Their life is a sacrifice, and they give us a chance to enter into that sacrifice with them. If you go to page 15 of the book, there's a quote from Isaac the Syrian in his ascetical homilies. He says, prayer offered up at night possesses a great power more than the prayer of daytime. And I'm not saying ladies should all go into the chapel in the middle of the night alone. I'm not saying that, but maybe turn the lights down a little or close the blinds just a little and enter into a moment like the darkness. But you can apply this to your home life as well, praying in the night. It is said that the monks used to pray, the hours that they got rid of, matins, they got rid of some of those really middle of the night prayers. They thought it was too inconvenient for people, but scientific studies have actually shown that you'd get better sleep if you get up in the middle of the night. And so, hey, those monks were onto something. So let's get back to our quote. Prayers offered up at night possess a great power more than the prayer of daytime. Therefore, all the righteous pray during the night while combating the heaviness of the body and the sweetness of sleep and repelling corporeal nature. There is nothing that even Satan fears so much as prayer that is offered during the vigilance's night. I'm going to say that again. There's nothing that even Satan fears so much as prayer that is offered during the vigilance at night. For this reason, the devil smites them with violent warfare in order to hinder them, if possible, from this work. But those who have resisted even a little, friends, who have tasted the gifts of God that are granted during vigil, and who have experienced in themselves the magnitudes of God's help that is always nigh to him, them utterly disdain Satan in all his devices. You only have to do a little. Let me tell you a couple of stories about this challenge. When I was a homeschool tutor and I taught at one of those academies that meets 2 days a week, I had the great pleasure and honor of teaching Algebra 2/trigonometry right after lunch. You can imagine that physical reality of the kids. They've just eaten lunch. They've had a good full belly. They've spent an hour chatting with their friends. Their body is going to start digesting their food. Their mind is still going through the plans they just made with their friends for when school's over. And they get sleepy. That's the physical reality of it. They're not going to pay attention. Their mind and body are already busy, and it's hard for them to focus. And there I am teaching them advanced math. Awesome. It was honestly though, it was a challenge and a kindness to try and acknowledge that these kids needed some time. So we did some warm up first to get them into it. But that was a physical reality of digestion. There is a metaphysical reality of digestion as well. When you have your prayers, spiritual reading, or meditation for Lectio Divina, you're focusing and offering your sacrifice, you're gazing at Jesus in the Eucharist, and you metaphysically need time to digest, and by which I mean incorporate the graces and insights that you're receiving in adoration. You need time, and silence gives your body that time. Just being with the Lord helps you to incorporate all those graces and insights you get. You can't just rush back out to the world. You're going to have missed something. Don't do like an auditory prayer your entire time. Slow down, get silence. And I want to remind you, we are not alone in this fight. Remember that how old that book is where we had, was it Isaac the Syrian and his ascetical homilies. That wasn't written yesterday, friends. This is a fight as old as time. And let's go now. We're going to go to the Last Supper. You can close your eyes and imagine this one. Think of a big Jewish feast like the Passover feast. There's a lot of food there. There's a lot of talking. Think of, for Catholics, all the readings we do at the Triduum service. They're doing a ton of readings on Passover. It's their entire family history, and they're going to know which tribe they're from, and so they're going to identify with different parts of different stories. So there's a lot going on right there, right? They're eating, remembering their eating a lot of food, comma, remembering their ancestors, comma, thinking about and pondering those reoccurring themes over and over in the Old Testament: trust, covenant, sacrifice, blessings, failures, wrath, conversions, penance, redemptions. It has been a long night for them. If you've ever done, the full Triduum masses, you know how long this is. It's not just long physically, but metaphysically, spiritually, it's long. So imagine you are the 12 or the 11 at this point. Their bellies are full, they're emotionally drained. And Jesus pulls them aside and says, let's go pray. Yeah, let's go out. Let's go out into the night, into this garden in the darkness, and we're going to go pray. And they're like, look here, buddy. You just did something with washing our feet, and we're not sure what that is that yet. But it reminds us of Moses wash and all the ritual washing of the priests. Are you saying we're priests? We don't know what this means. You said, this is my body given up for you. What does that mean? We need to do it in remembrance of you, okay? But we don't know what this means yet. They're trying to figure this all out. And they're like, we need time. And he's like, no, what we need is time alone with God the Father. And that's what we're going to do. So they did go, but they were challenged. And in that moment, they went outside because Jesus knew, and we're going to go back to our quote, prayer offered at night possesses a great power, more than a prayer offered in daytime. Therefore, all the righteous prayed during the night while combating the heaviness of body and the sweetness of sleep and repelling corporeal nature. There is nothing that even Satan fears so much as prayer that is offered during the vigilance at night. For this reason, the devil smites them with violent warfare in order to hinder them, if possible, from this work. But those who have resisted his wicked stratagems, even a little, remember, think of Jesus constantly trying to wake them up. And they'd wake up for a little bit. They tried. Those who have resisted his wicked stratagems even a little, who have tasted the gifts of God that are granted during vigil, and who have experienced in themselves the magnitude of God's help that is always nigh to them. Continue in a second. Because I want to stop right here and imagine what that night was like. Can you imagine those devils gnashing their teeth at all that Jesus accomplished on that night and all that he would accomplish in the next few days? And those disciples, they were just strengthened with all the events of the Last Supper. And they're fighting them, aren't they? Those devils do not want those guys offering the sacrifice of prayer. They don't want it. They are fighting. They are fighting for the attention, or in this case, the sleep of those disciples. They want them to fail. Can you imagine how different the passion might have looked if they had managed to stay awake? But we have all fallen, and we will all fall short. But take heart. Here is the end at last of this long quote. For night vigil is the light of the thinking, and by it the understanding is exalted, the thought is collected, and the mind takes flight and gazes at spiritual things, and by prayer is rejuvenated and shines brightly. Silence is metaphysical digestion, and no wonder the devil wants to keep us from it. Now you're at the book. Cardinal Robert Sarah's book on the power of silence. And that book is going to give you tips on how to accomplish that. It will give you a series of short little reflections and lessons. It's super easy to read. But I'm going to remind you of some other help, because you're going to read that book on your own. Padre Pio could see not only his guardian angel, he could see other people's guardian angels as well. And he wanted us to know that our guardian angel is always with us from the moment we're conceived until the end of time. That guardian angel will always be with you till the end of time. They are always with us. They are going to be our prayer warrior buddies when we go into the chapel. Remember, we've done all our things for Stasio. We've recollected ourselves, slowed down, sat in the moment. When I do Lectio Divina, I put on a special sweater. A lot of ladies put veils on before they go into the chapel. That really helps us to collect ourselves. Now we're at that moment. We're ready to offer our prayers to God for our priest, the archbishop, the deacons, and their mighty work. And right as we go into that chapel, right as we're at that door, before we fight with the key fob, right, we're going to invoke our guardian angel. We're not going to name him. Let's not start that. We're going to say, "Dear guardian angel, I need you with me. Do you have your battle armor on? Let's go." I know. I just told you to get all quiet. So maybe not do a battle cry as you go in, but come up with something. And then ask your guardian angel to help you with distractions and sleepiness. And it's so funny that Padre Pio talks about some of the greatest saints who said something like, if I start to go off the path, guardian angel, I give you permission. Do whatever you have to do to get me back on. And he said, and I wish I knew who the exact quote, but he said sometimes it's like a 2x4 in the back of the head to get you back on that path. I've personally asked my guardian angel to pinch me if I fall asleep praying the rosary. And a lot of people say, I'll let the angels finish my rosary for me, because what mother doesn't love it when a little baby falls asleep in her arms? And I'm so sweet and I'm beautiful. And you are all those things. You are a beloved son or daughter of the Most High and of Mary. You are all those things. But in that ministry, when you go into the holy hour, you are a prayer warrior. And it is a sacrifice we're giving. And again, we're prayer warriors. I mean, spiritual mothers. And we know the devil's attacking us and he's trying to get us to fail or quit. But we're going to do it with our guardian angel. And Mama Mary is going to be proud of us. So instead of Mama Mary being like, oh, the sweet baby, she's going to be like, oh, you did it. You managed to do it, right? Think of how proud your parents are when you do accomplish some great task. Think of that instead of that sweet little sleepy baby thing. We are offering the sacrifice up for those priests, deacons, and archbishops who feed us, right? They feed us. We are their flock. And as they are in persona Christi, we are in persona Maria. And so they are our children who need our support. So we've invoked our guardian angels. We've asked them to help keep us from distractions. And we're now going to invite them to pray with us. A great way to do this is with any angelic prayer. You could do the Sanctus, the Angelus. You could do a hymn like Angels We Have Heard on High. Remember, it tells us in Scripture that the angels are always singing before the throne of the Lord. This is an angel with us. St. Michael, he probably is longing to join them in singing the praise. So sing. And then pray your chaplet for priests. Read a book on the priesthood or the diaconate. Sit in your silent adoration. Do a Lectio Divina. Enter into that moment. Remember, don't program your whole time. Leave some free time for that metaphysical digestion, right? And when you go to leave, there is that seventh step. I know you probably forgot I said there were 7. I didn't. It's Thanksgiving. Whenever you have received a consolation or not. Just as I say on our Friday night Lectio Divinas, you may not have felt it in that moment. You're still digesting it. It's okay. You may not see the fruits of it left. I mean, how many times do we see the fruit of our digestion? It's new skin cells, new hair, right? We make our body. We don't really see that happening, but it happens just the same. Metaphysically the same. Those graces are pouring in. We may not notice the effect right away, but that's okay. We're going to give thanks for this opportunity. Not that men can't pray for clergy. If you're men out there, pray for clergy. Go ahead. But 7 sisters are in a sacred sisterhood with all the Marys, and it is a blessing to be able to sustain our priests, archbishops, and deacons. It is an amazing role that God has given to women, and so I give thanks for this opportunity. I give thanks for the sisterhood, for the archbishop, priests, and deacons that we have, who have answered the call, who sacrifice daily for us, our family, and our friends. And I want to give thanks to everyone who has taken up this great work, and I know there will be many blessings coming from, in this case, the 7 Sisters Retreat, Discernment, prayers and sacrifices during the upcoming year, and I'm sure all of you have that as well. I'm going to stay on here for just a couple of minutes. If anybody had questions, you can put them down in the live chat, and I have a few minutes here that I can answer them. Or not. Completely up to you. Either way, I hope to see you tonight. We have Lectio Divina every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. It's the same scripture passage, but I feel like as you move through the week, again, we're doing it a couple days apart, right? So we have that time for that metaphysical digestion to go on, and we can really give thanksgiving in the end for any blessings that we have received. Okay, okay. I'm trying to wait. I know you're just slightly behind me by a few seconds, so I don't want to cut you off. Ooh, Rusty heard the UPS man. Okay, I'm going to do a signal so when I see the signal on my phone, I know what time we're at. Okay, well, nobody seems to have any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and jump off. But if you have a question later, all good, put it in the comments below, and I will answer it as soon as possible. Friends, may God bless you and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you and to be gracious unto you. And may the good Lord bless you. In nomine Patris, Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.